Happy Friday, hockey fans. Welcome into an all-new edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live over on the DFO YouTube, where we are looking for your inbox questions. I always see them rolling, or I already see them rolling in. The show, a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. My boy Frank Seravalli in the Eagles sweater. We got Adam in the chat saying King Saquon. A couple more days till the Super Bowl. Shout out to everyone in Philly.
Go Birds.
Go Birds. Frank, it was an exciting night last night in the NHL. We're going to be joined by Aaron Portzline in a few minutes. The Blue Jackets on the receiving end of some Dylan Guenther magic last night, and that's actually where I want to kick off the show. It's our nightcap brought to you by JP Wiser's, proud to be the official whiskey of the NHL, offering Canadian hockey fans a premium drink choice to enhance every game night experience across the country. JP Wiser's, the official whiskey of game night. And we actually had a couple of thrilling OT winners last night, Frank. You had Drew O'Connor in Vancouver calling game with a penalty shot. And then you had this beauty from Utah, the play off the glass, the goalie assist all the way up to Dylan Guenther, who cashes his own rebound. Frank, Dylan Guenther returns from injury earlier than expected. In his first two games back, has two overtime winners. He is the definition of clutch. And we've talked about it before. He's a superstar budding right in front of our own eyes.
And that contract extension, man, oh man, does that look so good. I think the really exciting part, if you're Utah Hockey Club, yeah, I know there was recently a 5-game losing streak that really seemed to hurt this team when it comes to the postseason and their chances. But Sean Durzi inching close to coming back. He's on this road trip. You see Guenther and the magic that he's creating. I'm telling you, do not sleep on Utah Hockey Club for that 8th seed. I'm still holding out hope that when they get their full team, their full complement of players, that they are going to be squarely in the mix to make the postseason. There's way more runway than we might imagine at this point in time.
Yeah, so between them, Vancouver, and Calgary, they all have 28 games remaining in the season. Utah, 6 points back of Vancouver, 4 points back of Calgary. But if you want a little reason to believe here, look at the schedule. Utah is going to play Vancouver twice and Calgary once. That right there, Frank, they have a couple of big 4-point swings coming out of the break. And it's like, even a 6-point gap isn't unfathomable to close in a 28-game stretch, especially when you can rack up loser points too. And Utah's done a good job of bringing games to overtime this season. But you got some head-to-heads. Like, you can get right back in this thing by the deadline.
I hate to sound like Jason Gregor because I haven't analyzed the schedule yet, but I did do a Frankly Speaking episode, which we'll tease later with Flames GM Craig Conroy. It dropped today. And more than once, he mentioned in our conversation that the Flames have a very difficult schedule down the stretch. So I thought it was interesting that unprompted, he pointed that out. Maybe a little opening there if you're Utah or if you're Vancouver.
Very, very possible. One area Utah's got to be better at: winning games on home ice. 9, 12, and 6 in Utah this season. It has not been a great home housewarming party, I guess you could call it, in their first year at the Delta Center. While we wrap up last night's results, Frank, got to give some love to Alex Ovechkin. 1 goal closer. He is now 16 away from Wayne Gretzky. There are 28 games remaining for the Washington Capitals. I want to pinpoint one moment on the schedule where I would like to see Alex Ovechkin do his or get the job done. It's their final home game of the season. The Capitals will end the regular season with 2 road games, but their third final game is against the Columbus Blue Jackets. If he is going to break the record on that night, he's going to need to have a pace of 0.61 goals per game from now until then. So far this season, he's at 0.68. Ovi maybe doing it on home ice would make this story even better.
So were you saying that's the last home game of the season?
Yeah, so they have 28 games remaining, and their 26th game from now is the final home game.
I think he does it before that, but I think he does it in the month of March. Look, we haven't even had it for a while. Look, this is 4 straight games that Ovi scored a goal. We haven't had a hat trick or anything like that. So you throw in one of those, and all of a sudden the numbers look drastically different. 16 away from the record. Last night, by the way, Ivan Fedotov, his 180th victim in the NHL. So 180th different goalie that Ovi has scored on, just further increasing his own record.
Yeah, it is quite something. Frank, you talked about your interview with Craig Conroy coming up. We'll tease that a little bit later on in the show, but let's zero in on the Calgary Flames for a second here. They lose again. It's back-to-back losses for the Flames. And, you know, the break's coming up, and maybe it's coming at a good time. Calgary's kind of plateaued a little bit here 5-5 in their last 10. And one guy that's kind of standing out is Dustin Wolf. And listen, don't take this as me disparaging Dustin Wolf. He's had an amazing season. He 100% deserves to be a Calder Trophy finalist this year. And without him, like, look at Dan Vladar's numbers. Where would the Flames be without Dustin Wolf? In his last 2 games, though, he's allowed 9 goals against. And I think he's lost 4 of his last 5 starts as well. I think this break's coming at a good time for Wolf and the Flames.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think 2 things. One, the workload has significantly increased for Dustin Wolf. I mean, it's February 7th, and he's made 12 starts already in 2025. That's a lot. 13 starts, actually. So he has taken the lion's share of the workload. I thought it was really important for Dan Vladar to get that recent win. It's been tough to come by for him. And 2, as much as the Flames, have kind of hit a little bit of a rut here at 5-5. I don't even really call it a big one. I just provide some perspective. Think back to last year's All-Star break. Elias Lindholm traded at the start of that. All the names that have been shipped out between now and the start of last season, it's been a wildly different team. And I know they're better off for it, but just kind of gives you some idea of, hey, there's been a lot of change. And the fact that this team is 7 points clear of the Ducks, 9 points clear of the Kraken, right on the heels of the Vancouver Canucks. All things considered, the Flames are in a pretty fine spot.
Yeah, they are. In your chat with Craig Conroy, like, again, we know they aren't selling anything ahead of the deadline, but what kind of a sense did you get on maybe his sense of urgency to improve heading into the deadline? Do like is that front office feeling pressure to get in this year, or are they playing with house money down the stretch?
No, I think now that they've made an addition with Frost and Farabee, I think that kind of takes some pressure off to go out and add. But he did mention that they're going to continue to be aggressive to try and add pieces for the long haul for this team. And, it's a bit of a different situation than the Montreal Canadiens, but I mentioned this on Amazon Prime last night on Coast to Coast. The Canadiens, to me, and not to change the subject, are like, they're one of the most fascinating teams. I think the Flames are in this category as well. They're teams that you might not expect them to strike, but if they can find a piece that makes them better for the long haul, they're going to be aggressive. The Flames fit that category. The Canadiens, the Flyers, there's a whole bunch of teams that are in the mix. I called the Canadiens last night. They're like Vandelay Industries, importer, exporter. They could be trading away David Savard and Jake Evans and Yoel Armia. A whole crew of guys could be out the door, but they could also be in the mix to trade for a Dylan Cousins or pick another player on the list that Elias Pettersson, try and go out and improve your team in a significant way. So I'd put the Flames in that category moving forward as one of the true wild cards at the deadline, that they're a team that's going to make it exciting. And one other thing, Craig Conroy did mention in our conversation, if it's 2:40, 20 minutes to go until the deadline, and there's players sitting on the board that are cheap, Flames are going to be adding there too.
Flames have money. Flames have extra draft picks. So do the Montreal Canadiens. Each of those teams with an extra first in the 2025 draft. Habs also have an extra pick in the second round, 2 extra picks in the third, and an extra pick in the fourth. So the idea that, yes, Frank, they could be importing as well as exporting some veterans definitely lines up.
If I could only have worked in a Sue Ellen Mischke reference too, like things would have been over the top.
Let's keep the deadline talk going here, Frank. Today's deadline countdown article is a player destinations look at Kyle Palmieri, a really interesting piece, a guy who I'd honestly kind of describe as versatile. He's the 3rd most used penalty killing forward on the New York Islanders. He puts up.
Don't think that's a good thing, but go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I just mean you can use him on the PK if you need to. A team acquiring him can use him for penalty killing help. He also scores 2.02 points per 60 at 5-on-5, 5th on the Islanders. Again, Islanders are very meh. His on-ice numbers are meh, but this is a guy who I think could impact a contender.
I agree, because I just think he's consistent. You know what you're getting. Regular season or playoffs. Regular season, 0.29 goals per game. Playoffs, 0.27. Like, there's no drop off. He's someone that can be a high volume shooter, and he scores or gets shots from areas that are high danger. He's 75th percentile in the league in high danger shots. He's 89th percentile in mid-range shots. So he's someone that, like when I look at the list of teams that could add a potential scoring winger, it's an intriguing group because it could expand beyond this. But I also think one of the more interesting exercises when looking at Palmieri and the deadline is to look at the returns. You know, you go back to last year, you don't have to search very far for some trade comps for Kyle Palmieri. Vladimir Tarasenko is probably the best comparison you could find. To both of them, multi-time 30-goal scorers. Tarasenko was 2 years younger at the time that this trade was made. It essentially ended up being 2 third-round picks. It was a fourth that upgraded to a third because the Panthers ended up winning the Stanley Cup. Anthony Mantha traded just the day before last year. He went for a second and a fourth. In both of these situations, the team retained half. Both of them were in very similar cap numbers. And so whether it's a second and a fourth or 2/3, however you want to dice it up, it seems like that's, you know, the goalposts that have been set for Lou Lamoriello if he does end up trading Kyle Palmieri. There's tons of teams that could use a secondary scoring bump. Is it out of the realm of possibility that Kyle Palmieri over a long 25-game playoff run scores double-digit goals? No, I don't think so. He had 7 in 19 games for the New York Islanders in 2021. He's just a steady, reliable piece. And to comment on the first part, which we were talking about, his penalty killing, not a good thing. I think the thing with Palmieri is to set up some clear expectations. He's so far this year has played almost 10 minutes more on the PK in 53 games than he played in 82 games last year. The problem with that is the Islanders unit is ranked 31st in the league. And same thing with, you know, late game situations. He's not going to be a hero defensively. He doesn't block a lot of shots. He doesn't get a lot of stick checks. He's not a physical player. So as long as you go in eyes wide open, knowing shooter that's going to score goals, that does get to high danger areas and moves pretty well, Kyle Palmieri could be a really valuable addition.
And he's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, as you pointed out with those contract comparables, Frank. Let's wrap up the deadline talk with what will be our roundtable article tomorrow over at dailyfaceoff.com. And it's players that teams should maybe think twice about moving on from. An interesting kind of collection of names thrown around here by some of our writers over at the site, including Larkin pointing out, hey, Jake Wallman, he's having a great year in San Jose. Maybe some people are going, oh, do you sell high on him after a strong 55 games? I like Paul Paduti pointing out Bowen Byram. Frank, we talked about him yesterday on the show. Like, he's maybe the easier sell for Kevin Adams to move in Buffalo because it's like, he's been here for a year. Let's just say it's not working. Let's move on. We don't have to commit big money to him. But he might not be the smartest defenseman for them to move, as you said yesterday.
The first guy I'd be moving off this list is Jake Wallman. No disrespect to Matt Larkin. His numbers and metrics have always been good. Like, people look at Jake Wallman and like, look at this guy. He's an absolute stud. I'm just looking at ways that he impacts the game. And of all the players on this list, he's by far the least impact. And obviously probably also the most readily available. I agree with your thought process on Bowen Byram. I wonder if there's a sell high opportunity for the New York Rangers. When you look at K'Andre Miller and his size, how well he skates and how athletic he is, there's teams out there that are salivating going, if we could get that player and turn him into something big for us, that'd be huge. But the longer his game continues to evolve, the more opportunity that you're probably in a position where teams stop and say he kind of just is what he is. I think the same thing about Elias Pettersson and the Canucks getting ahead of it. We've got a real long sample size, a calendar year now, where we know what Elias Pettersson has been. We can look back to his history and say that he's more than that, and that's fine. But I think a bigger statement's been made about what he's been recently.
Yeah, and that's fair. I took this question, Frank, a bit of a different way for my answer. And I actually went with Seth Jones from Chicago. And not because I don't think the Hawks should be scared about him bouncing back somewhere if they decide to move on from him. But I think he's one of those guys where next summer, again, cap going up, maybe some teams get some money off the books. I think right now you'd be dealing with a very limited sample size or a very limited sample of teams interested in him. Also, his full no movement clause maybe affects that a bit. But I think that's a guy who maybe this summer, if he plays well down the stretch, maybe a market develops for him a little bit, and you're not just getting rid of the money or whatever. You're getting a bit of value for him. I think holding on to him, that's a summer move.
I'm with you. And I think we've seen a lot of history in the NHL of players that you just hang on 6 more months and all of a sudden they go from being a guy. Think about recent deadlines. And I can't come up with one off the top of my head, but a guy in the summer who was like, hey, you got to attach an asset to move, then became a pending free agent in short order. And all of a sudden it was, hey, we can get some assets for this guy. So if you take your time, and the cap is obviously, as it continues to evolve, is a more friendly situation for not just teams acquiring him, but also for the Hawks. Here's the other part of this. The Hawks have an empty cap table. They have to spend major money to get to where the floor is. And not that that's going to be difficult to do, but wouldn't you rather at least keep Seth Jones, who chews up 9.5 of it, as opposed to trading him just to get him off the books now, creating a further $10 million cap that you need to spend? It's an interesting point. I think one well made by you.
A win for Tyler on a Friday. I'm going to go into the weekend feeling good now. Let's get to our big segment for the day, Frank. It's the All 32, and it's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. You can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program. It all comes with their unbeatable pricing policy, and you can apply for the Charm Diamond Flexity card today and get approved for no interest financing on your purchase in minutes. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. You want to talk Columbus Blue Jackets? You bring in Aaron Portzline from The Athletic. Always a pleasure to welcome you into the show, Aaron. And let's start with sort of the current state of this Blue Jackets team as they head in to the Four Nations break. The season's gone great so far. They've maybe plateaued a little bit here. Is that simply because of injuries, or is this team maybe hitting a little bit of a wall? Oh, I think you might be muted, Aaron. You got on mute.
I've done this before. Sorry,
there we go.
Frankie, I like the Eagles pimping there. I like that.
Go Birds.
I think every team, when you see kind of a mini finish line here in the middle of the season, I think there's that sort of take a deep breath mode. But I do think injuries, like you watched this team play last night. Matthew Olivier's on the power play, right? Sean Corrali and Justin Danforth are out on the ice at 3-on-3 overtime when the game ends. Like, these are not scenarios that these guys would ever see if this team had Jenner, Monahan, Marchenko, Chinikov, others. Like, those are a team that could maybe least afford injuries has been hammered by them here. And they're still, I thought it was a hell of a point last night, actually. So I think I still think they're as competitive as they've been. It's just they are sort of stripped of a little bit of firepower, and they're now trying to win games 2-1 and 3-2 rather than, score 5 or 6 goals as they were early in the season. So,
yeah, it's been tough to watch for a team that's battled its heart out all year. And through it all, though, you have Don Waddell yesterday on Blue Jackets radio during the game declaring, we are going to be a buyer.
Yeah.
Obviously, that conversation is a nuanced one when it comes to this Blue Jackets team and where they're heading. So help unpack for us what you think that means.
Well, I think what it for sure doesn't mean is a rental. I think what it specifically means is a forward. I think they're expecting, I know they're expecting Jenner back on the other side of the Four Nations. The bigger questions are Monahan and Marchenko, who could be, I think, at the earliest mid-March, probably more realistic late March. And then that's a significant stretch without them, obviously. And even when they're back, you're wondering, especially Monahan with the wrist, like, is he going to be, he may be cleared to play. Is he going to be 100% back to who he was before the injury? That seems like a stretch for me. So they're looking to bring in a centerman, or a forward specifically. I don't know that it's specifically a centerman. And my next conversation with Don Waddell, which will hopefully be here in a little while or tomorrow, is what are they looking for within that forward? Is that playmaking? Is that scoring? Is that size? They're going to be a different team when Jenner comes back. They'll win some more battles along the wall. Like, the young guys are still obviously not quite there yet. But I for a while, it seemed like Jenner was going to be treated as their trade deadline acquisition almost. And I think now they realize that they need to add a little more beyond that.
Okay, so the other part of the nuanced conversation then is obviously, since it's not a rental, you're looking to add something that can help you for the longer term.
Yeah.
That said, though, how much of a significance will there be in trying to make a push to get this team in this year? How do you balance those two things if you're Don Waddell?
Well, I think when you look at a first-year GM in a market, I think you have to take into account that there's considerable leash there, right? Like this is not, his job is not dependent on them getting into the playoffs this year. And honestly, them having a sniff at it should be considered gravy, I think. But I think just in a pure manager of a hockey team sense, I think he wants to help them get in. Like you see what this team has was put up with. Everybody knows the Gaudreau trauma that is still with them, but the way that they've played, and you don't move beyond that. To me, like with that level of grief, you move with it. You learn how to move with it, not away from it. It's still there with you. They've done that in a really respectful, beautiful way, honestly. But they've also through that emptied the tank almost every night for Dean Evison and his coaching staff. Like this, to see these guys compete, it's wild to see them empty the tank and to see so many players. 20-year-old centerman Adam Fantilli played 24 minutes last night. I mean, that is number one line center, 24 minutes, held his own. And there have been stories. Look at Werenski's numbers this year, just almost over 30 minutes so many times this year. So I think he wants to reward that. I think he feels like what he's seen out of that group deserves a reward. I don't think he's going to do it at the cost of the future, but this team has cap room, obviously, and I think ownership is willing to spend. So I think when we say rental, I think they could well be adding a player with an expiring contract. I just don't see them giving up pieces or high picks to acquire that.
I want to talk about some of the developing pieces on that roster. You mentioned Adam Fantilli in the minutes he played the other day, but that trio of Fantilli, Sillinger, and Kent Johnson all seem to, at least just looking at the numbers, have taken a step forward this year. Is there one of them whose development has surprised you more or maybe impressed you more than the others?
I think this, if there's a surprise in that group, it's probably Kent Johnson, because you wondered a bit last year watching him play if he's not the biggest guy. Is he going to clear that hurdle of being able to play at an elite level with the size difference that he faces versus he's 6 feet tall, but he's a very slight player. And that's an adjustment for those guys. But from the first day of training camp, and you never really know how serious to make anything you see in training camp, but he just looked like a totally different player. He's developed clearly. He's thicker through the neck and the chest. He can hold his own a little bit better, but he's just so slippery and elusive with the puck. Look at that goal he scored the other night when he pulled up in Buffalo. And I mean, that's unreal skill. And we're starting to see that skill on a regular basis now. A great playmaker, great vision on the ice. Obviously, we knew he had all of this, but now that he's able to compete in the league and show that, he's really been a dynamic player. It looks like a point-a-game guy to me in the not-too-distant future. Fantilli's been, he's now over 100 games in the NHL, and you see a different level from him now than you did early in the season, especially offensively.
Porty, we really appreciate you joining us. The Blue Jackets have been an amazing story to watch this season, and appreciate your coverage. And also, we know the amazing story that you had last year, the life-saving measure, Lindy Noel stepping up from the Columbus Blue Jackets communications staff to donate a kidney to you, and obviously how much that's meant to you and your family. But wanted to just raise a little awareness on our way out today for Mike Brophy, another member of our hockey writing community who is also in need of a kidney. He's in the fight of his life. I tweeted out the link earlier this week for the Ottawa Hospital and their kidney donor program. He's searching for a donor, A or O blood type. You never know where the donor could come from, and also the donor link that happens, the exchange, you may not be donating to Mike, but you may be donating to someone that can help Mike. So just wanted to take a second to raise awareness for that. And yeah, your story's been amazing. So hope everything's been going well on that front.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. I was hoping we would get Mike Brophy in here too. It's such an amazing thing. And I think it's one of the few things we agree on today in our country. I think Canada too, maybe. That organ donation is a good thing. It's taking that next step. That is the final hurdle, the hardest hurdle. But please, if shared the link that I think I shared your link, I've shared every opportunity that I can. At least get the word out, talk to people. Mike Brophy is a tremendous guy. He's meant a lot to a lot of people through the years. And I have faith that he'll get the same gift that I was given.
Appreciate your time as always, Aaron. Very well said.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Frank, let's get to our poll question results real quick here. We just talked about the Blue Jackets, their playoff chances with Portzline. Let's talk a little bit more about the Utah Hockey Club. We asked people to throw a percent on it. What chance does Utah have of making the playoffs? 0, 15, 30, or 60? I used some different numbers in this one. I voted 15. I kind of thought like, hey, 40% chance Vancouver gets in, 40% chance Calgary gets in. So 15 on Utah. Where do you go?
I would say 30. I would say it's probably a little bit north of 30 if I'm handicapping the true strength of the team. Still some things to be determined. We don't know what the Canucks are going to look like yet on the other side of this deadline, which I think you have to be aware of and concerned. And then I'd say my true answer is somewhere between 30 and 60, but not ready to get to that 60 level.
Fair enough. 15% was the most popular option voted on over on our Twitter poll for the day. Let's get to a couple Ask DFO questions here, Frank. There is one rumor that has our chat in a frenzy today. Noah Dobson's name got floated out there. Smoke, fire, false alarm, Frank?
I would say false alarm. But
everyone was asking.
Look, first off, there are no leaks in the New York Islanders. Second, I don't understand what sense it would make for the Islanders. They've got Barzal, they've got Dobson, they've got a goalie in Sorokin. You've got 3 positional boxes checked. If there's any hope on the other end of this, you have to keep Dobson.
Mm-hmm. Jay also asked another one, and he asked for trades during the Four Nations break. So there's no official roster freeze or anything, Frank, but do you think there's like a little nudge from the league being like, hey, don't take attention away from what we're doing here?
No, I think just from a human level, if there's a trade that could be pulled off to allow that player the break, obviously not impacting vacation plans or anything, but if you could get into town a few days early and sort out your housing situation and your family situation, or maybe even bring your family with you, be a huge leg up. So I would say that if something were to go down, and look, we had trades during All-Star weekend last year, multiple of them, in fact, any buzz about the league during this period of time when there are no games, not just for Four Nations, I would think is a real good thing for hockey.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's get to our daily bets for the day, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm betting on some Friday night fireworks between the Avs and Oilers. Give me the over. The over hit last time these two teams met. Mackenzie Blackwood, although he did have those back-to-back shutouts, his numbers over his last 10 have started to dip just a little bit. And the Oilers, I think you can always bet on them scoring and giving up a few. So the over between Edmonton and Colorado. And after hitting my goal scorer parlay last week, going at it again. JT Miller to find the back of the net, and Jeff Skinner, who's going to stay on Leon Draisaitl's wing tonight. Those two together, 15-1, Frank. I mean, Miller's got 2 goals in 3 games with the Rangers. Skinner scored last game for the Oilers. 15-1 seems nice.
Tasty. Like, I'm all about the plus 1,500 in anything. I'm just not betting on Jeff Skinner to score, though. I know he's been hot, but it's just not doing it.
My favorite Super Bowl bet, by the way, Dallas Goedert, 7+ receptions, plus 300. Huh? I think it could be a big game for him.
Yeah, it could, but that is a ton. They're also going up against a good tight end, so he's not even the best tight end in the game. My favorite bet is tails. I bet the coin flip every year.
Tails never fails. Bet365, by the way, one of the only books you'll find this on their heads or tails prop. It's plus 100 either way. There's no juice on it. So it's like truly a 50-50 coin flip, and you get the true 50-50 odds. Let's wrap up the show.
What's your score? Give me a score.
I will say the Chiefs win 31-28.
I got Eagles 27-21.
All right. I like it. You got to back your boys. Like I said earlier, I'm doing the emotional hedge thing for myself. Shout out to Josh Allen.
By the way, I'm also in first place, not by a comfortable margin, but in a playoff pick'em pool with like 30 other hockey writers. And so it's like, do you go with your squad? And if you lose, not only do you lose the pool, but you also have the misery of your team losing? Or do you go with the emotional hedge? To your point, Chiefs win, then you win the pool, and at least it's some monetary compensation for your team losing. I don't know. I don't really feel good about it either way.
Yeah, I think it also depends on how you feel about jinxes, because you're like, oh man, am I jinxing my boys if I pick the Chiefs? Anyways, let's wrap up the show, Frank. A little bit of garbage time. We talked about your upcoming interview with Craig Conroy on Frankly Speaking. Let's take a sneak peek.
What do you think happened with Kuzmenko? He got there last year after coming in from Vancouver and put up some decent numbers. And you could see there's obvious talent there. The rookie year that you have in Van, that doesn't happen by accident. What happened this year, do you think?
No, it was weird. We started off, I think he had 8 or 9 points in the first 10 games. And for some reason, he just wasn't shooting the puck. He'd be in prime scoring chances. He was holding it. He was looking for even something better, maybe to pass it, maybe. But the last 5 games he was here, he was shooting the puck again. He was making plays. He was making plays in the power play. And, he can score. And I don't know what happened kind of in the middle for 25 or 30 games, but, he was playing well at the end. But I think with him being an unrestricted free agent, to be able to bring in a couple younger guys, it just made sense for us.
There you go. You can catch the full interview coming soon on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. That is a wrap on us, or for our week of shows. Tommy asked, will you guys be on during Four Nations? Yes. Monday night, special preview show. We're not doing a show Monday afternoon. And then it's the regular time for basically all the Four Nations with a couple of bonus shows mixed in there too, Frank. We're going to be live, boots on the ground in both Montreal and Boston. I can't wait.
Can't wait. Let's do it.
All right, we will chat with everybody Monday evening, special edition of the show live from Montreal. Everybody in the YouTube, you were great. For our producer, Pat Puff, Frank, I'm Tyler Remchuk. Have a good weekend. We'll chat on Monday. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.